This is the Glastonbury Festival, or at least it will be. Right now it's a dairy farm set in the Somerset countryside, home to about 400 cows. Through fall, winter, and spring, they graze the fields for grass and shrubs, in turn producing milk that's used to make worthy farm cheddar. But come late April, it's time for them to relocate to their summer residence at a nearby farm. That's because these fields are about to be transformed into the largest greenfield music festival in the entire world. In a matter of weeks, 200,000 people will descend onto this farm in the middle of nowhere, Britain. First, they block off access. There are a number of roads and footpaths running through it, which of course need to become private as construction begins. Next, the perimeter fence goes up, along with the very first facility, a preliminary site office from which the construction process will be led. Before construction begins, though, they need to address the roads. Most of them are made of dirt, meaning in Britain's rainy weather, with a large number of heavy vehicles, they'd quickly become impassable. That's why they lay down these temporary metal road coverings rated for up to 40 tons. There's also the matter of bridges. There are a number across the site, and small farm bridges were never designed to accommodate a constant barrage of semi-trucks, so while many have been permanently upgraded through the years to handle the demand, others get temporarily reinforced just for the festival period. Around mid-May, the core stage of the build begins, so the site office gets supplemented with shower and toilet facilities so that staff can camp on site. Across the following weeks, this staff headquarters will continue to grow. They'll add a first aid center, a welfare center with mental health and conflict resolution support, a staff canteen with 3 hot meals a day, even a number of crew bars. The bulk of the build work involves erecting around 90 major temporary structures, ranging from tents to stages. What this looks like from the perspective of Glastonbury Festival Events Limited, the actual organizing company, is facilitating the work of a number of subcontractors who do the operational work of erecting each facility. Their staff does little themselves beyond, well, organize. As this occurs, work starts to build the core infrastructure of the event. Sanitation is of paramount importance. 200,000 people is a lot, and if there are not enough places for them to go, they'll find their own places to do their business. Glastonbury's sanitation solution would be described by some as innovative and by others as horrific. Basically, they dig giant pits in the ground. They then install what's called a long drop toilet, a row of toilet seats on top of holes that drop into the bigger hole. The quote-unquote innovation is that the large hole is big enough that it doesn't have to be emptied during the festival. Worthy Farms roads are massively congested during the festival, so having trucks constantly make their way through to empty out porta potties would be quite detrimental to broader festival operations. Rather, they clean the pits out just once at the end of the festival, then refill the hole with dirt and allow residual waste to biodegrade. Of course, it's not all about outputs. There are also the inputs. The festival includes about 1,000 different traders, food vendors, craft stalls, charity tents, and more. Now, of course, it would be chaos if each and every one of these vendors had to be entirely self-sufficient. Each stall would operate its own generator, you'd have propane canisters strewn all over the place, and the single-use plastics consumption would fly firmly in the face of the festival's eco-conscious mission. That's why Glastonbury essentially operates its own utility system. While Worthy Farm looks like a farm and operates as a farm, the fact that the festival was founded by the farm's owners, who still own it to this day, made it practical to build some permanent infrastructure. The most notable example of this is its water supply system. Underneath the fields is a network of pipes similar to that underneath any town, distributing water to key facilities. This has existed for decades, but the trouble was that demand over festival weekend was so much more than traditionally needed in the area, about 3 million liters a day compared to typical demand of just 500,000 in the adjacent village. Naturally, that demand spike strained the local water mains and led to low pressure for nearby residents. They complained that they were unable to do their laundry or take a shower during the festival, which wasn't just annoying, it was a risk to the festival itself. When community sentiment goes down, so too does the likelihood of getting an operating permit. As a fix, the festival experimented with trucking water in using tankers and filling massive bladders that would feed into the pipes, but while this alleviated the water pressure issues, it still led to community impact due to the non-stop procession of trucks snaking through small village streets. So eventually they built 2 massive underground reservoirs. Today, in the weeks leading up to the festival, these are slowly filled at a rate that does not stress the local system, and they have enough capacity to cover festival weekend without creating exceptional demand on the local system. The other utilities are provided by third-party contractors. The festival requires that all traders buy propane from the company Festival Gas, which operates regular deliveries throughout the site. Meanwhile, another company called Agreco builds a temporary electric grid for the festival using a combination of large generators and renewable sources, and traders contract directly with them for their power supply, more or less how they would with a traditional grid operator. This is only the start of the rules imposed on vendors by the festival. Each one of them is an independent business, but they're perceived by attendees as a component of the overall experience, and therefore Glastonbury is accountable for them and their actions. That's why they all have their binder, a huge collection of paperwork on which their ability to keep operating hinges. While exact requirements will vary, in 2015 it looked like this. Vehicle and staff passes, proof of insurance, health and safety documentation, even their very own A5 no smoking sign. But the vendors, for their part, have had plenty of time to prepare this documentation along with their staffing plan, exact footprint and layout of their space, and all the other minutiae required as the application window opens some 9 months prior, with selection being made 3 months prior to the festival. Selection takes a long time because a festival is not just trying to fill the openings, they're trying to fill the openings with vendors that match the festival's particular values and particular needs. From the nonprofit and jewelry tents to those making greasy late-night meals or morning after breakfasts, vendors inform the experience of a festival just as much as the art and music, so the Glastonbury planners pore over each and every detailed application. And should a vendor get in, they'll be paying for the privilege. While exact fees to trade at Glastonbury aren't listed because each is case by case, sizable and well-positioned food vendors have reported prices in the £15,000 to £20,000 range for the busier spaces nearer to major stages, with rates dropping the farther one is positioned from the festival center. A telling sign that the hefty upfront fee for a 5-day run is worthwhile, though, is a particular feature that appears in small print on the Glastonbury map: the wholesale market. Essentially, it's a shop for the shops. Each morning of the festival, there's a procession towards this spot as wholesalers bring in staple ingredients, fresh foods, and serveware for the depleted vendors to purchase. Much of these interactions take place in the morning when the festival grounds are generally quieter and easier to navigate. For a small window of time, a slew of trucks and tractors are permitted to run deliveries around the site very slowly and carefully. But for most, supplies are purchased and then hauled by hand or wagon to get ready for the next rush. Staying in stock is critical for vendors and the festival alike, as a vendor is required to station their booth at their assigned spot for the entire run of the festival, as leaving early would mean a significant fine and lost chance to come back next year. In part, this is down to security, as the vendor areas, or markets, function effectively as islands sealed off from the general admission areas. Booths, therefore, are impermeable extensions of fences, each keeping the festival public outside the market zone where vendors have their vehicles and extra supplies, and in some cases where there are vendor-only services and camping areas. Even separated from general admission, running a vendor at a festival is a draining affair. The lines at some hours will be unruly and never-ending, and at other times non-existent. The heat will be sweltering, and there will also be unrelenting rain. All the while, there will be pressure to move enough product to justify the entry fee, pressure to keep a food truck up and running for the next few weeks until another festival, and pressure to adhere to food safety standards, the last of which the festival is also keeping tabs on. To help wrangle Glastonbury's vendors, the festival deploys managers with offices placed near groupings of markets to ensure policies are being respected by the vendors and guests, and offering themselves as a resource should anything start going sideways between the two parties. These market managers report to the partnership director, who's responsible for dealing with all the external partnerships, from fencing contractors to food vendors, and operates from the event control center, which in 2015 was located here at the Green Barn. Beyond market management, much of the overall security and safety structures that the festival relies on emanates from the event control center. At its busiest, it will see some 500 employees and volunteers working in and around it, while representatives of each aspect of the festival will be based out of it for the festival's entirety, such as the operations director, infrastructure manager, security director, site manager, and health and safety coordinator, to name a few. Directly neighboring the control center is fire control and a makeshift police station, the former supplied by the regional Devon and Somerset Fire and Rescue Service. Connected by phone, radio, and CCTV, the Event Control Center keeps close tabs on everything from impending weather and conditions across the ground to the flow of guests and density of crowds, all with the aim to monitor pending problems and proactively game plan solutions. And to make sure nothing is missed and response can be hastened when problems do arise, the directors and managers stationed at the control center work with official area organizers spread across all areas of the festival, from stages to campgrounds. It's this group that will supervise the build-out of their region, carry out daily inspections, and manage adherence on everything from health and safety standards to the on-site traffic management plan. Of course, keeping a festival running smoothly and safely during it requires ample foresight before it. A campground, for instance, can be well monitored by area organizers, accounted for by police, and aided by a robust lost and found system, but crime and petty theft are things that a good festival addresses long before the festival. At Glastonbury, campgrounds are modestly lit by strung-up festoon lighting to minimize crime in the dark of night, while each camp will have lock-up areas for campers' valuables. In such a chaotic environment, the best way to solve problems is to limit them in the first place. The same goes with crowd dynamics. Crowd control procedures only really work when officials have a good sense as to the exact number of participants they're dealing with. As a generally free-spirited venture from the beginning, Glastonbury has always dealt with its fair share of gatecrashers. In its history, the festival has even welcomed them, a past that has created a culture of seemingly good-natured trespassing. But that changed with this fence. Running 5 miles or 8 kilometers around the festival's perimeter, the Super Fortress fence, as it's called, has helped the festival ensure a right-sized crowd by minimizing intrusions with its smooth, 12-foot-tall face and 45-degree overhang at the top. Still, some will try it, so spread across the festival are guard towers and patrols on motorized vehicles to watch for those trying to sneak over or under the massive fence. Perhaps countering the festival's traditionally welcoming ethos, the fence is a safety necessity because letting in thousands of unaccounted-for guests will strain resources and alter crowd dynamics to a potentially dangerous extent. And it's also a licensing necessity, as this fence came into being in 2002 in response to a £15,000 fine for having gatecrashers take the crowd size well over the licensed capacity. Without a far more aggressive system of keeping people out, Glastonbury was facing the potential of losing its license entirely. Now, doing a festival like Glastonbury once is, in and of itself, a massive feat, but doing a festival like Glastonbury year in, year out is yet more impressive because it not only has to function, it has to function well. What's at risk is not just losing business, but losing the festival's right to operate at all. There's no inherent right for Glastonbury to operate. If things go wrong, it risks losing its operating permit. And making Glastonbury's operations yet more challenging is the fact that it has to do all of this in a quiet, sparsely populated rural area of famously bureaucratic Britain. An endless array of regulations are imposed on the festival by both local and national government. Perhaps the biggest risk area in the government's eyes centers around alcohol. It's of course in the festival's financial interest to sell as much alcohol as possible, but too much drunken debauchery can and has turned music festivals into riots. Therefore, the UK government prohibits certain activities that it deems likely to promote excessive consumption. For example, the venue must monitor to assure patrons are not pouring alcohol into other people's mouths, and the festival is prohibited from running drinking games that involve consuming a certain amount of alcohol in a certain amount of time. But the government isn't the only entity that the festival is answerable to. Just as significant a risk is that of upsetting their insurers. You see, festivals are incredibly risky businesses, but they're also massive businesses. Glastonbury is estimated to earn upwards of $80 million a year in revenue, but that revenue all hinges on just 5 core days of operation. If weather washes it out, or key artists fail to show, or reality doesn't match expectations, Glastonbury will likely have to refund ticket sales, either due to government regulations or public pushback. Of course, almost all of the expenses, contractors, tent rentals, infrastructure, staff salaries, will have already been paid for. It's not like a traditional concert venue where a year-round schedule offsets the risk of individual shows. Here, all their eggs are in one basket. Without insurance, one rainy weekend could bankrupt the business, and even without foul weather, the festival might struggle to hire contractors and artists due to concern about non-payment in the event of cancellation. So, insurance is effectively mandatory. Almost any large festival will hold a massive policy covering both general liability and more unique risks like event cancellation and artist non-appearance. Very few insurers, reportedly about 10, will actually underwrite these policies given their massive scale, giving them quite a bit of leverage in setting terms. Every policy is unique, but much of the design and operations of festivals is therefore dictated by the insurer. For liquor liability coverage, they might require that sales are limited to 2 at a time. For general liability coverage, they might set security staffing minimums. For artist non-appearance coverage, they might prohibit the festival from booking particularly troublesome artists. For event cancellation coverage, they might require an on-site meteorologist. But while these insurance policies make event management a sustainable business, they are also now holding the industry back. Many of these policies did cover cancellation due to communicable diseases, meaning the insurers lost a colossal amount of money in 2020 due to the COVID pandemic. 5 years on, it's still almost impossible to get a policy covering pandemics, at least at a reasonable cost, but even the policies excluding it have inflated in cost. There have been a number of high-profile incidents that likely involved high-dollar payouts in recent years, like the deadly Astroworld crowd crush. And then on top of that, there's a global trend of increased extreme weather. Just as this is pushing up home insurance rates in fire-prone areas, it's also raising the cost of festival insurance. Combined, there are instances like the Bonnaroo Festival in Tennessee, which canceled in 2020 due to COVID, 2021 due to flooding, and 2025 due to heavy rains. With 3 cancellations in 6 years, it's no wonder insurance rates are going up. Bonnaroo is owned by Live Nation, which, due to its scale, can likely negotiate lower rates as its risk is diversified over many different festivals, but the impacts are more pronounced for independent festivals like Glastonbury, where the risk is more singular. And insurance issues are greatest for new festivals. Insurers charge higher rates when a festival is unproven, which makes it exceptionally hard to start a new independent festival, especially when Firefest so visibly demonstrated the risks. But of course, the other risk to the festival's longevity is that the neighbors just get sick of it. And it's happened before. In 1992, Ann Goods, a worthy farm neighbor, erected a 30-foot white cross overlooking the festival site from her property. As a devout Christian, Goods was antagonistic towards what she considered blasphemy taking place during Glastonbury between the free love and free drugs. And it wasn't just her. As the festival grew, so too did the schism between it and the locals. So in response, founder Michael Eavis developed a series of solutions that today fall under the tightly named Event Management Plan, one that's recorded, approved, and filed by Somerset Council. These plans are designed to effectively contain the festival. Successfully implemented, it should make it so the neighbors in Pilton barely perceive Glastonbury, even as their village of 1,000 effectively grows to 200,000. Of course, not everything can be contained. A certain amount of litter, for example, is to be expected, and therefore the festival commits to cleaning up at key sites like the surrounding streets and local train station for 3 weeks before and after the event weekend. Light and noise pollution are also inevitable, so a 12:30 p.m. curfew is instituted on the main stages on Friday and Saturday, along with a midnight sound curfew on Sunday. After that point, smaller stages and venues are allowed to keep operating under strict maximum volume conditions. In fact, to assure compliance, crews from the council patrol locations near the festival with decibel meters until dawn. And the same goes for lighting, which is installed specifically to minimize the risk of nuisance onto neighbors. Even the generators for directional lights have decibel caps. Of course, the one thing that just simply has to go in and out are the people. Transporting 200,000 people to the middle of the countryside is, of course, a headache. Naturally, public transportation is most efficient, least intrusive to neighbors, and it's the method of choice for at least a third of attendees. That includes nearly 30,000 who take the Great Western Railway, which adds more than a dozen extra trains from London Paddington to the Castle Cary stop per day to meet demand. That stop, however, is not at the farm, and from Castle Cary Railway Station, a tiny 2-track stop with little infrastructure, officials help to guide the thousands of people onto shuttle buses which take them to the farm. Riders can only bring what they can carry. There are no trolley carts for luggage, and large items like instruments just aren't allowed. Buses carry another 20,000 people who arrive in a cascade of times over the start of the festival and are dropped off at a dedicated entrance close to the action for coaches. And then, of course, there's everyone who drives, with 28,000 public cars, 5,000 camper vans, and another 12,500 vehicles for employees. Traffic management starts nearly 30 miles or 50 kilometers from the farm. First, there are 35 miles or 56 kilometers of designated clearways where cars are not allowed to stop or pull over. Then there are more than 350 miles or 560 kilometers of diversionary routes, forced one-ways, and dozens of closed exits, all designed to keep traffic moving and reduce impact on local neighborhoods. Here, roads are closed at Lottisham Road, A37, and A361 to keep cars concentrated on thoroughfares instead of traversing through farmlands and disrupting rural life. Residents themselves are given vehicle passes to make sure they can still move around between villages unimpeded. In fact, they're given a lot of things. Residents of Pilton, the community most impacted, receive complimentary tickets to the festival, and the surrounding neighborhoods get a number of price-tiered tickets along with a designated place to park at the festival. Officials also set up a 24-hour hotline for noise and light complaints. And, in the fall, organizers throw a Pilton party, essentially a mini music festival, as a thank you to the villagers, workers, and local people. And those efforts to work with the community instead of against it have worked. For 55 years, the festival has returned, continually growing in both numbers, stature, and scope. Music festivals are incredibly complex exercises, and they're incredibly risky businesses, but there's a reason why organizers go through all the effort and risk. Done right, they're also incredibly successful businesses. They're massively popular among fans and also among artists. In fact, they're some of the most attractive gigs out there. For headliners, the pay is massive. For emerging artists, the crowds are massive. And ultimately, this makes sense. For a festival to build a 200,000 person city on some empty cow pasture, there must be a very good reason why. So let's say that now that you've learned about the logistics of music festivals, you want to learn about the logistics of ski resorts or search and rescue or commercial fishing or the Hajj or coal mining or arms manufacturing. Well, boy do I have news for you. We made a whole series called The Logistics of X that dives into those exact subjects. That's one of almost a dozen different Nebula originals produced by the Wendover team. We've also made a documentary about what happens when you're a tiny Alaskan town almost entirely dependent on cruise ship tourism and then COVID stops that entire industry. We made a documentary about the political kerfuffles that led to most of the western half of the US relying on the Colorado River to deliver them more fresh water than the river actually does. The consequences are bad, by the way. We made a documentary about what happens when you're a tiny British territory in the middle of the South Atlantic who was only ever connected to the world by a week-long ferry, but now you open an airport in 2016 and your entire way of life changes. And we've made even more than just that, but it's worth knowing that it's not just us. There are hundreds of creators on Nebula. Everyone uploads their regular videos there ad and sponsorship free, and plenty go on to make other great Nebula originals. I think Wendover viewers would particularly enjoy 17 Pages, which is a documentary by Bobby Broccoli about one of the biggest scientific controversies of the 20th century. It's really well made and, frankly, mind-blowing. If you value high-quality, thoughtful, independent entertainment, then Nebula is the place to be. And in my opinion, what really seals the deal is that it's quite affordable. When you use our link, nebula.tv/Wendover, you'll get more than 40% off an annual plan, which brings the cost down to just $36 a year. That's not per month, that's per year. So this is far less than really any other streaming service or YouTube Premium, and signing up even helps support the channel. We don't operate a Patreon because we put all of our efforts into Nebula, so once again, head over to nebula.tv/Wendover to sign up, and thanks if you do.